Hi, so today I want to share about understanding the inner mother. A lot of people call it the mother wound, the other wound. There's this other, there's this separate being from us that we're trying to negotiate with, live with, learn how to deal with, and it's our mother. We can go through the portal of learning about ourselves and our mother without calling it a mother, but going through first, like, starting with learning about our mother. So I'll share, and you'll see how it shifts. It shifts into and remember, these are not actually facts about their relationship with my parents or my relationship with my mother. It's views of the other. As I'm going into it, I'm learning about the other. We learn so much about the space in us that is not us, that is our other. For example, the mother, like the magnet that you throw at a magnet, it just sticks together. Like the mother's energy just comes to us like that. So we can understand ourselves through her, through our other. So my mother had to mother her siblings. They were very poor family, and her parents were controlling. She was controlling, and I was unwanted. She controlled my father and tried to control me. She was self-victimizing, gaslighting us, invalidating, smear campaigns, blame shifting, scapegoating me, no privacy, refusing to accommodate needs or boundaries, holding grudges forever, pity plays, triangulation, pitting people against one another. She didn't genuinely want a kid with my father. She didn't love him. I can see it without pain. She always wanted me to think I need her and I'm not good enough, that I won't make it on my own. Or she always shamed and judged me for things like my father and that didn't serve her. She weaponized my father against me and did her best to distract herself and numb herself, and my inner child doesn't trust her. So now we see, like, I just opened like a huge door to this horrible other. Now, I can't say that's my mother, but that's the experience I had with the other. My other could have been her shoved aside parts of her she couldn't integrate from her relationship with her mother. So remember, this is the other. My mother is a whole person. My mother is who she was to my siblings, who she was to me, who she was as her own person, in her hobbies, in her work. But this is a version that we talk about to learn about who our other is. This is the other that I've been sort of like not trusting my whole life, whether it's my mother or someone else. This is who they are. This is the idea. Okay. She didn't support me in a way where I can have dignity. She seems jealous. There's no positive affirmation, reassurance, or encouragement. There's a cruel bullying humor, and she was doing the best she can. She was lonely and runs away from it, so afraid of vulnerability and couldn't even protect herself. She could be so jealous of me and doesn't accept things as they are. She taught me the value of simplicity, though, manners, quiet, stocking up, independence, and she loves me the best she can. And she really doesn't have many habitual or practical ways to safely express. She's hypersensitive to criticism and criticizes as a defense to feel in control. So I'll leave that there as the other. And now I'm going to talk about cravings. Like, I'm going to use Buddhism for this. It's in Dhammapada, chapter 1, verse 1. It says, all mental phenomena have mind as the forerunner. They have the mind as their chief, their mind made. If one speaks or acts with an evil mind, dukkha, suffering, or bad vibes, follows them just as the wheel follows the hoofprint of the ox that draws the cart. And there's 3 poison types that are responsible for our suffering. One is ignorance, one is greed, one is hatred. And there's 3 types of cravings that I started. So we're talking about craving here. Really, there's a craving for, like, relief or like avoiding pain and suffering, the reality of rebirth, like just to, it's like these are like, that's like the most subtle. And then a little more tangible is like a fixed existence or identity, not accepting impermanence. And then there's like the more substantial, which is like pleasures of senses, wealth, power. And there's a path. In Buddhism, they call it, and I'm not advocating for Buddhism here. I'm talking about how to recognize that, for example, in the Dhammapada, like these are like their teachings that they write down the verses. Chapter 1, verse 2, it says, if one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows them like a shadow that never leaves them. Now, in the Torah Jewish way, we learn that the Torah teaches us that Hashem is our shadow. So what I'm saying here is that we're using these ideas to make us better at our practice, at our true self, not saying become a Buddhist. Unfortunately, there's a lot of Jewish people practicing Buddhism because they didn't learn Judaism in this way. There was like that other. Anyway, so how did it happen that Buddhism started? The Buddha was this man in a kingly palace who went out and then saw things. He saw illness, he saw poverty, he saw a holy person who was like very poor. And then he saw a dead person, and so he saw a sick person, an old person, a dead person, and a very poor holy person. And he said, I want to be like he saw like a ascetic, like somebody who doesn't care about the physical world, who was still seemed to have something coming from in him that was more substantial than the substance. And so we say like to be, so what is it called to be like a Buddhist, to be a bodhisattva? It just means to be a refuge. It means to be a refuge for all the other, and to stop the craving of, I want you to be different, or to stop the attachment of, I don't want to suffer, I don't want you to be this way. All these control issues from the other. And the other is like the enemy, or the other is not the enemy. And there's this path, which is like, and they have different paths, it's called Theravada, and I knew about them because they were the forest monks. They like to be outside. So we call that, it's a really, and then there's Mahayana. So there's this path. Mahayana is what I mentioned, to be like a refuge, to stop chasing, to be with, instead of like fighting the other, running away from the other inside of us, like trying to control. It's like letting go and just like fully being a refuge for whatever the other is, and just peaceful. And then there's this other path, which is about, like I said, like the forest monks, like the, just one second. I feel like I have somewhere something I want to share on this. And when we say we have an other that is like the bad other, that's all these things I mentioned about my mother, which again I tried to say is this other. It could be leftover stuff from her mother that was repressed, but really like, could be like a huge percentage was her love and her presence and her trying to be free and her own stuff. And then a small part was this other, but then this other is the one that like I need to work with, because this is the other that I could have inherited as my other, which is mother. Like my other is mother. So who's the one that gives you what you need is your mother. How does she know when you need it? Like, is she there to give you what you need when you need it? Is she looking for power? Like all of this, like, is she so insecure, or does she not care what anyone thinks of her? Like, so we can see here that the Buddhism things I'm bringing in are really about how to stop like chasing somebody's approval, and rather to just be ourself. And these two, for example, paths, like the Mahayana and the Theravada. So, here. So the Theravada is like, they call it, instead of this bodhisattva path, which is like to be a refuge for the other, whoever the other is at any moment. Then you have the Theravada, the Arhat path. This is like kind of the acceptance that it's normal to have the other, and you transcend this by making yourself wise through the pearls that come to irritate you. Like something's coming to bother you, and you let it transform you. So you become beyond the cycle of the human way of passing the time. In other words, I want to like I'm going to say it like this. So when you're a refuge for the other, first you do it for yourself, right? I have this version of this other. Now, again, I'm speaking about this even though like I wrote about this 5 years ago. I don't see my mother this way now. I see this as like a version of her, a very insecure, scared version of her that's desperate not to be seen as flawed, failing, and this other. So this other version of her that she needs to accept, the mistakes she made, the way she caused harm because of her pain, that would be the bodhisattva path. That's the path of becoming a refuge, and even wanting, as she heals her other, she becomes less of a burden on others, like healing her own burden of wanting to be seen only a certain way, or wanting to run away from certain things. if she heals that, she just sort of accepts the otherness of her own self, and then she can be with others. We would say that becomes like the path of refuge. However, the other path I'm mentioning here, Theravada, is more like the path of not needing to have an other. So you would say you transcend your humanity is to say, I don't need to have this repressed other. And it's not necessarily about being a refuge for everybody. It's about being almost like a source of purity, that when people are in your presence, they don't feel like, if you are really, really on a high level of being a bodhisattva, for example, you would say in Hebrew, it would be like there's a tzaddik, you would say that this tzaddik is there to make you feel that you belong and you're welcome. And you do that for yourself, you can do it for others. The next level of, like, we could say like a tzaddik is somebody, like a tzaddik is a righteous person, a pure person, a goodwill person. You could say that this tzaddik is actually able to, in their presence, your inner divisions that may have caused you to have an other, like one side of you versus the other, and who are you identifying as, is so dissolved that there's just a oneness. There's a oneness of pure, everything is connected, there isn't the borders. So being in a presence with someone who you are the same, there is no other. So one is we welcome the other belongs, we're not upset at the other. And the next level is complete oneness, but it's not complete oneness in the word of only that there isn't an other, it's that there's a purity, that there's no ill will, there's no desire to control, there's no feeling of impure self, that there's a part that has to be shamed or shouldn't be there. So I'm glad, and like what is the path that of Judaism that I'm saying Buddhism can support, not as a Buddhist, but using the teachings, the wisdom, is that, remember I mentioned the pearls, so you have like something irritating you that comes in, and you work with it and you transform it, and no longer does it hurt you, but it becomes a pearl, a beautiful pearl, and people will be attracted to this pearl and will want to wear the pearl even, right? So we could say that this wisdom of becoming pure is somewhere in the middle. We could say the Jewish path is to bear witness, and we in Judaism the Torah was given, it's called edus. Edus is like testimony, and edus is also congregation, and ed is a witness in Hebrew. So in this way, we're learning that when we learn these Buddhist teachings, we learn the pearl of wisdom, that when we are willing to bear witness to real life without trying to control it or avoid it or deny it or even try to hurt it, at that point it's as a right to enlightenment. We are bearing witness. There's a bearing. Bearing is like bearing suffering, like bearing witness. You have to be able to keep looking and be with, and imagine the level of purity, pure love it takes to see people who are dealing with their other and still loving them and still being there for them. I wish you a blessed day, good day, and I will continue with another offering tomorrow.